Most people do not collapse because life is hard. They collapse because they decide too early that life is against them. A delay becomes rejection. A closed door becomes humiliation. A silent season becomes proof that nothing is working. And little by little, they stop responding to life as it is. They start responding to the meaning they attach to it. That is where so much unnecessary suffering begins, not in the event itself, but in the interpretation that follows it. This is why some people break in seasons that were only asking for patience, while others keep moving through uncertainty with surprising steadiness. The difference is not always circumstance. Often it is posture, the posture of someone who treats every unclear moment as a threat, or the posture of someone who understands that life can still be unfolding in their favor, even when the pattern is not visible yet. That is what this episode is about, not blind optimism, not pretending pain feels good, not forcing yourself to smile at everything that goes wrong. This is about something stronger than that. It is about learning how to move as if life is still working with you. To stop reading every setback as a verdict. To stop treating every unknown as an attack. To stop assuming that if the road is unclear, the road must be wrong. Because the way you interpret life shapes the way you walk through it. And once that changes, your energy changes, your decisions change, your timing changes, the risks you take change, the doors you notice change. Even your ability to endure difficult seasons changes because you are no longer carrying the extra weight of believing that every hard moment means you are losing. So I want to walk through 10 shifts that can help you build that posture. A steadier one, a stronger one that allows you to keep moving without demanding that life explain itself too early. Because sometimes the greatest change does not begin when the outside finally improves. It begins when you stop meeting life as if it is always trying to defeat you. The first shift is simple. Stop taking every delay personally. This is one of the deepest ways people create pain that was never truly there. Something moves slower than expected, and they do not just feel frustrated. They make it mean something about themselves. A delayed result becomes, I'm falling behind. A missed opportunity becomes, maybe I'm just not enough. A quiet season becomes, nothing is working for me. And suddenly the original delay is no longer the only problem. Now it has become self-rejection. That is where the real damage begins, because people often suffer twice, first from the delay itself, and then from the story they attach to it. They do not simply experience slowness, they turn it into humiliation. They do not simply face uncertainty, they turn it into personal failure. They do not simply wait, they decide that waiting must be proof that life has passed them by. But a delay is not always a verdict. Sometimes something is simply unfinished. Sometimes the timing is still forming. Sometimes the thing you wanted is not being denied, only redirected. Sometimes the season is slower because something deeper is still arranging itself in ways you cannot yet see. And if you rush to personalize every delay, you destroy your strength long before reality has actually said no. Think about how often this happens in ordinary life. You apply for something and hear nothing back, so your mind immediately starts translating silence into inadequacy. You start building something, but progress is slower than you imagined, so you begin treating slowness as proof that you are incapable. You watch other people move faster, get noticed sooner, succeed earlier, and suddenly your own pace starts to feel like a personal insult. But none of that interpretation is objective. It is emotional. It is the mind turning timing into identity. That habit is expensive. It weakens patience. It poisons effort. It makes people quit too early, not because the path was wrong, but because they felt ashamed of the pace. And shame is a terrible companion in any process that actually requires time. If you keep treating delay as rejection, you will constantly abandon things that were only asking you for endurance. A stronger mind learns to separate slowness from meaning. It learns not to make every pause in movement into a statement about worth. It understands that a door being closed today does not mean the whole future collapsed. It understands that silence is not always absence. Sometimes it is incubation. Sometimes it is redirection. Sometimes it is simply the space between what has ended and what has not yet fully arrived. That is why this lesson matters so much. The moment you stop taking every delay personally, you recover a huge amount of energy. You stop bleeding self-worth into timing. You stop turning every unfinished chapter into a character judgment. And once you stop doing that, you become much harder to break in seasons that are merely unclear. Because not every delay is life rejecting you. Sometimes life is still building something you do not yet have the eyes to recognize. Number 2. Act before you feel ready. This is where a lot of people quietly lose years. They keep waiting for the right internal condition before they begin. More confidence, more certainty, more emotional clarity, more proof that the timing is correct, more signs, more assurance that the step will work out before they actually take it. And because they believe readiness comes first, they keep postponing movement until life starts feeling like something that is happening somewhere else. That belief is one of the biggest traps in personal growth, because readiness is very often produced by movement, not by waiting. Confidence does not usually arrive before the step. It forms because of the step. Clarity does not always come before action. A lot of the time, action is what creates it. But the hesitant mind reverses that order. It says, once I feel ready, then I'll move. And that sounds reasonable until you realize how many people stay trapped inside that sentence for years. Look closely at missed opportunities, and you will often find the same pattern underneath them. Not a lack of ability, not a lack of intelligence, not even a lack of desire. A delay caused by waiting too long to feel internally prepared. Someone wanted to start but kept hesitating, wanted to speak but kept reviewing, wanted to apply, leave, build, begin, change, but kept telling themselves they needed a little more certainty first. What they called preparation was often hesitation with better branding. That is why this lesson matters so much. If you keep waiting for your emotions to line up perfectly before you move, your life will be governed by moods instead of direction. And moods are terrible leaders. They change too quickly. They depend on too many things. They become especially unreliable when fear is involved, because fear is very good at disguising itself as caution. It makes delay feel intelligent. It makes hesitation feel mature. It makes standing still feel safer than it really is. But life often begins responding only after you move. That is the part many people do not fully trust. They want the path to reveal itself in advance. They want reassurance before commitment. They want the bridge to appear before they put weight on their own legs. But so many of the things that matter most do not work that way. The conversation becomes easier only after you begin it. The direction becomes clearer only after you enter it. The confidence grows only after you survive the first awkward steps. Think about how often people imagine readiness as a feeling when it is really more of a relationship with discomfort. The people who seem ready are often just more willing to move while still uncertain. They do not wait for fear to disappear. They stop letting fear vote on every decision. That is a completely different way of living. A stronger posture is this: move while the mind is still negotiating. Move while the emotions are still lagging behind. Move before the perfect feeling arrives, because the perfect feeling is often a fantasy used to delay the real beginning. The tragedy is not that people are afraid. The tragedy is how many never discover what would have opened for them if they had moved one step earlier. Number 3. Trust movement more than doubt. Doubt gets louder the longer you sit with it. That is one of the simplest truths people ignore. They think if they wait long enough, think carefully enough, review enough angles, and stay still long enough, they will eventually arrive at peace. But what often happens is the opposite. Stillness gives fear more room. Delay gives doubt more language. The mind starts building arguments that feel careful, intelligent, and responsible, but are often just fear becoming more convincing because it has been left alone too long. This is why doubt can be so deceptive. It rarely sounds weak. It sounds thoughtful. It sounds strategic. It sounds like caution. It sounds like someone trying to avoid mistakes. But many times it is just fear wearing the clothes of intelligence. It keeps asking for more time, more certainty, more evidence, more emotional readiness, not because all of that is necessary, but because it doesn't want you to step into the part of life where things become real. And reality is exactly what doubt hates, because movement reveals things much faster than rumination ever can. The moment you act, reality starts answering questions that the mind could never solve alone. You stop guessing and start seeing. You stop imagining and start learning. You stop building emotional theories around what might happen and begin encountering what is actually happening. That shift matters, because the mind in fear is often far more dramatic than life itself. Think about how many things become smaller the moment you move toward them. A conversation that felt impossible becomes manageable once you begin speaking. A decision that felt heavy becomes lighter once it is made. A new direction that looked terrifying from a distance becomes workable once you take the first real step inside it. But while you remain still, doubt keeps growing in abstraction. It feeds on distance. It feeds on possibility. It feeds on your lack of contact with reality. That is why movement deserves more trust than doubt. Not because every action is automatically wise, but because action gives you truth. Doubt usually gives you distortion when it has had too much time to expand. A mind that has been sitting in fear for too long starts treating hesitation like wisdom. It starts mistaking emotional noise for a valid warning system. And that is where people get trapped. They begin listening most carefully to the version of themselves that has had the least contact with reality. That version should not be driving. A better posture is this. If doubt has been repeating itself too long without producing clarity, stop treating it like guidance. Move, test, enter. See what reality says once your body, choices, and effort are finally involved. Because many things that look impossible in the mind start changing shape the moment they are touched by action. And once you start trusting movement more than doubt, another truth becomes easier to live with. You stop demanding the full map before the first step and begin understanding that the path often appears only after you move. Number 4, the path appears after the step. This is one of the hardest things for people to accept because most people want a full map before they commit. They want the future explained in advance. They want to know exactly where the road leads, exactly how long it will take, exactly what will go wrong, exactly how it will all make sense before they take even one meaningful risk. And because life rarely gives that kind of certainty, they stay where they are and call it caution. But that is not caution, it is paralysis with a better name. A lot of people are waiting for clarity in the wrong place. They are standing still, demanding that the path reveal itself while they refuse to enter it. But so many meaningful paths do not work that way. They do not become visible from the outside. They become visible from within. You see more because you are already moving. You understand more because the next step has changed what you are able to notice. That is why the path often appears after the step. Not all at once, not in a magical way, but progressively. One decision reveals the next one. One act of courage exposes a new option. One beginning makes a hidden direction visible that would never have appeared to the version of you who stayed frozen, waiting for guarantees. That is how life tends to work. It gives clarity to movement more often than it gives clarity to hesitation. Think about how many people delay their own lives because they want the entire road before they take the first turn. They want to know where the relationship leads before opening the heart honestly. They want to know the full outcome before beginning the project. They want to know exactly how the transition works before leaving what no longer fits. But the future is not usually handed out in complete form. It unfolds in response to commitment. That is what makes the unknown feel so offensive to the fearful mind. It wants the hidden parts revealed now. It wants life to prove itself in advance. But the unknown is not always evidence that the road is wrong. Very often, it is simply the natural condition of any meaningful path. If you are doing something real, something difficult, something alive, some part of it will remain unclear at the beginning. That is normal. That is not failure. That is how growth often looks before it becomes visible. A stronger way to move through life is to stop demanding certainty before participation. Let the next step earn the next piece of clarity. Let movement show you what thinking alone cannot. Let the road answer you as you walk it, because if you wait to see everything before you begin, you may never begin at all. Number 5. Confidence is built while moving. A lot of people think confidence is something you need before you begin. That is why they keep waiting. They imagine that one day they will finally feel ready, steady, certain, and strong enough to move without hesitation. They look at confident people and assume those people started with something special. More certainty, less fear, more belief in themselves. But most of the time, that is not true. What looks like confidence from the outside is usually something much less glamorous. It is evidence. Evidence collected through movement, through repetition, through discomfort, through awkward beginnings, small recoveries, mistakes, adjustments, and the quiet realization that you can survive more than your mind predicted. That is where real confidence comes from. Not from thinking about action, but from acting enough times that your mind has fewer reasons to doubt your ability to handle what comes next. This matters because many people treat confidence like a gift instead of a result. They wait for the feeling first, when the feeling is often built second. They want inner certainty before outer effort, but life usually teaches the reverse. You try, you wobble, you adapt, you learn, you repeat. And somewhere in that process, the mind starts changing its opinion of you. It starts realizing that you are not as fragile, incapable, or unprepared as it once assumed. That is how confidence grows. Not in theory, in contact. Think about anything you're good at now that once felt unnatural. Speaking up, driving, setting boundaries, going to the gym, having hard conversations, starting new work, handling rejection. None of these things usually begin with confidence. They begin with discomfort. The confidence comes later because you kept meeting the moment instead of backing away from it. You collected proof, and proof is much stronger than positive thinking. That is why this lesson is deeply reassuring, but it should not be taken softly. You do not need to feel fully confident before moving. In fact, waiting for that feeling may be the very reason it never arrives. The only reliable way to build confidence is to let life show you again and again that you can enter difficult moments, survive them, and keep going. So when your mind says, "I need more confidence first," what it often really means is, "I have not collected enough evidence yet." Then collect it. Move once, learn once, recover once, repeat. Because confidence is not something you wait for, it is something you build while moving. Number 6. Not every setback means no. This is where a lot of people misread life and then punish themselves with the wrong conclusion. Something becomes difficult, and they assume it must be wrong. A door closes, and they treat it like destiny. An attempt fails, and they instantly start turning failure into identity. The obstacle is no longer just an obstacle. It becomes a verdict. proof that they are not good enough, not ready enough, not meant for it, or not meant for anything larger than what they already know. That is how people quit too early. Not because the path was truly over, but because they gave friction a meaning it never actually had. They treated resistance as rejection. They treated pain as a final answer. They treated one hard moment as if life had just explained their entire future. But difficulty is not always a no. Sometimes it is a correction. Sometimes it is a redirection. Sometimes it is pressure that forces you to grow into the thing you said you wanted. Sometimes it is exposing weakness that needed to be seen, not because you are disqualified, but because you are still being shaped for what comes next. And sometimes it is simply the ordinary cost of doing anything real. Think about how often people confuse emotional pain with objective meaning. A rejection hurts, so they assume it must be final. A project struggles, so they assume it must be the wrong path. A relationship ends, so they assume the whole future has collapsed. But the mind in disappointment is not always a reliable interpreter. It is quick to turn temporary friction into permanent truth. That is the mistake. A stronger person learns to ask a better question, not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What is this asking of me now?" Sometimes the answer is to adjust. Sometimes it is to mature. Sometimes it is to stop repeating the same weak pattern. Sometimes it is to choose a different route. Sometimes it is to persist longer than your emotions currently want to. But none of those responses require you to treat the setback like a final judgment against your life. That distinction changes everything. Because when you stop reading every obstacle as destiny, you recover your ability to stay engaged. You stop collapsing at the first sign of resistance. You stop acting as if life has betrayed you every time the road becomes hard. Instead, you begin seeing friction more accurately, as information, as training, as refinement, as one part of a longer unfolding, not the whole meaning of the story. That does not make setbacks pleasant. It makes them readable. And once you start reading them correctly, you move differently. Less defeated, less dramatic, less likely to abandon what still has life in it just because the first version did not work the way you imagined. Because not every setback means stop. Sometimes it means grow, adjust, and keep moving. Number 7, expect life to meet you differently. A lot of people move through life expecting resistance before anything has even happened. They expect delay, rejection, disappointment, confusion, bad timing, closed doors, and hidden threats. Then they wonder why they feel tense all the time, why they hesitate so much, and why they keep missing quieter opportunities that never arrive in the form of certainty. But expectation shapes perception more than most people realize. If you walk into life assuming hostility, your whole posture changes. You become guarded, defensive, impatient, and overly alert to anything that confirms your fear. That posture costs more than people think. Because once your nervous system expects life to be against you, you stop meeting moments openly. You start scanning for what is wrong before you have even seen what is possible. A neutral delay feels loaded. A quiet room feels negative. A person's uncertainty feels rejecting. A season of transition feels like failure. You begin interpreting life through suspicion, and suspicion makes the world feel smaller than it actually is. This is why expectation matters so much, not because expectation magically controls reality, but because it changes the way you enter reality. And the way you enter life affects what you notice, what you attempt, what you tolerate, and what you withdraw from too early. A person expecting only disappointment often stops engaging before life has even had a real chance to respond. A person with grounded trust moves differently, more steadily, more openly, more intelligently, less desperate to force outcomes, less quick to panic when something is not immediately clear. Think about two people facing the same uncertain situation. One assumes this is probably going wrong. The other assumes, this may still unfold in a way I cannot see yet. The situation outside may be identical, but the inner posture is completely different. One person contracts, the other stays available. One starts protecting themselves from imagined defeat. The other remains engaged enough to notice options, signals and openings that fear would have hidden. That difference is enormous, because life is not only what happens to you, it is also what your mind is prepared to perceive inside what happens. If your expectation is always shaped by fear, fear will keep organizing your experience. It will make you miss subtler forms of progress because they do not look dramatic enough. It will make you overlook gentler forms of support because they do not arrive as total certainty. It will keep training you to read life as opposition, even when life is simply asking you to stay present longer. A stronger posture is not blind optimism, it is disciplined trust. The decision to stop entering every chapter as if it is already lost. The decision to let life meet you differently because you are no longer arriving with the same old assumption that everything unclear must be bad. And once that changes, something else becomes easier too. You stop fighting every unknown as if uncertainty itself were a personal attack. Number 8. Stop fighting every unknown. This is where a lot of people make life much heavier than it already is. They are not only afraid of uncertainty, they are offended by it. They act as if the unknown is doing something unfair to them personally. If life is unclear, they assume life is being cruel. If the season is confusing, they assume something is wrong. If the future is not yet visible, they start treating that lack of visibility like a problem that must be solved immediately. That stance is exhausting, because the unknown is not a small part of life. It is a permanent part of life. No one gets a full map. No one gets complete explanation on demand. No one gets every answer at the speed their anxiety wants. But some people spend years fighting that fact, and the fight itself becomes one of the biggest sources of their suffering. They are not only carrying uncertainty, they are carrying resistance to uncertainty, and that second burden is often heavier than the first. This is why unclear seasons feel unbearable to certain people. Not because ambiguity is always so painful by nature, but because they keep demanding that life explain itself before they agree to keep walking. They want the reason now, the reassurance now, the lesson now, the guarantee now. And when none of that arrives, they begin spiraling, not because the road is truly broken, but because their mind cannot tolerate not knowing. That reaction costs a lot. It turns transition into panic, waiting into humiliation, open space into threat. A person can be standing in a season where something is quietly forming, but because it has not become visible yet, they begin treating the entire chapter like a mistake. They rush to label it, interpret it, condemn it, or escape it before it has had a chance to reveal what it actually is. But the unknown is not always punishment. Sometimes it is simply the space where growth is happening before your eyes can confirm it. Sometimes life is rearranging things too quietly for your fear to call it progress. Sometimes a season stays unclear because you're not meant to have the full meaning yet. You are only meant to keep moving through it with enough steadiness that the shape becomes visible later. That is why this lesson matters. You have to stop treating ambiguity like an insult. You have to stop demanding that life become emotionally digestible before you are willing to trust it. That does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means becoming steadier. It means understanding that not everything unclear is wrong, and not everything unresolved is dangerous. A stronger person learns how to walk through the unknown without turning it into a war. They let the season remain unfinished without collapsing under that fact. They stop asking life to explain itself prematurely. They stop exhausting themselves trying to force psychological certainty where none is available yet. Because when you stop fighting every unknown, you recover a lot of energy. And that energy is exactly what you need for the next truth. You do not need control over everything in order to keep moving forward. Number 9, you do not need control to move forward. This is where a lot of people stay trapped without realizing it. They tell themselves they are being careful, but what they are really chasing is control. Control over outcomes, control over timing, control over how they will feel, how others will respond, how the future will unfold, and whether anything painful will happen along the way. They believe peace will come once life becomes predictable enough to manage. But that peace never arrives, because control is not a stable foundation for life. The more tightly you try to control everything, the more fragile you become when life inevitably refuses to cooperate. One unexpected delay unsettles you. One change of plan throws you off. One uncertain answer pulls your whole nervous system into tension. Not because the event itself is unbearable, but because your mind had made control the condition for calm. That is the real burden. A lot of people think strength means being able to secure outcomes in advance. It does not. Real strength is being able to remain internally steady while outcomes are still unknown. It is being able to carry yourself through uncertainty without demanding that life become fully obedient before you agree to move. That is a much deeper form of power than control. Think about how many dreams, decisions, and beginnings get delayed because someone keeps waiting for the point where risk disappears. They want to know the whole road, remove all discomfort, predict all consequences, and guarantee success before taking one real step. But life does not offer that deal, and if you keep asking for it, you will spend years preparing for a level of control that was never available in the first place. That is why letting go of control is not weakness, it is liberation. It means you stop trying to manage the entire road and start focusing on what is actually yours. Your effort, your direction, your standards, your ability to respond, your willingness to keep moving even when the future is not fully arranged. That is what gives a person real force in life. Not the illusion of total command, but the ability to walk steadily without it. A stronger way to live is this: stop asking, how do I control everything that might happen, and start asking, how do I carry myself well through whatever happens? That question changes the center of gravity completely. It pulls you out of fantasy and back into strength. It reminds you that peace does not come from mastering every outcome. It comes from trusting your ability to meet what comes without collapsing. Because you do not need control over the whole road. You only need enough courage to keep walking the part you can actually touch. Number 10. Live as if life is still on your side. This is not naive positivity. It is not pretending pain is pleasant. It is not forcing yourself to call every loss a blessing while you are still bleeding from it. It is not denying confusion, grief, disappointment, delay, rejection, or difficulty. It is something much more grounded than that. It is the decision to stop meeting life as if it is always trying to crush you. That decision changes more than people expect. Because when someone assumes life is against them, they move differently. They become tighter, more desperate, more reactive, more exhausted by every unclear season. They read temporary confusion as permanent defeat. They treat every closed door like a final sentence. They keep bracing for betrayal, and that constant bracing changes the quality of their choices. They risk less. They trust less. They panic faster. They shrink sooner. Not because life has fully defeated them, but because they are already meeting it from the posture of someone expecting loss. That posture is expensive. It makes people feel abandoned in seasons that were only asking for patience. It makes them collapse under uncertainty that could have been carried with more steadiness. It turns life into something they are always defending themselves from, instead of something they are still participating in with strength, discipline, and openness. And when that happens, they do not only suffer from what is happening outside them, they suffer from the way they have trained themselves to walk through it. Living as if life is still on your side does not mean assuming everything will look the way you wanted. It means refusing to believe that every delay is punishment, every obstacle is rejection, and every unknown is proof that the whole future is broken. It means understanding that life can still be working with you in forms your fear does not recognize yet. A redirection may still be for you. A difficult season may still be shaping you. A closed path may still be protecting you from something you would have called success too early. That is the deeper posture, not fantasy. Trust. Trust that you do not need to turn every hard moment into a personal betrayal. Trust that you can keep moving without demanding that everything become clear immediately. Trust that life is larger than the interpretation your fear is offering in this exact moment. And most of all, trust that the way you walk through uncertainty changes what uncertainty becomes. Think about the difference between someone who says, "This is hard, so maybe life is still unfolding," and someone who says, "This is hard, so everything must be collapsing." The outer event may be the same. The inner world is not. One person stays available to possibility. The other starts emotionally closing before life has fully spoken. One keeps moving with discipline. The other starts grieving futures that have not even ended yet. That difference matters, because the greatest shift was never only in the outer world, it was always in the posture with which you met it. The moment you stop reading life through the lens of defeat, your energy changes, your timing changes, your willingness to move changes, your relationship with uncertainty changes, even pain changes, because pain no longer has to carry the extra burden of meaning everything terrible at once. So live as if life is still on your side, not because you have proof of every outcome. Not because every season is easy, but because that posture makes you steadier, cleaner, stronger, and much more able to see what panic would have hidden from you. What breaks most people is not reality by itself. It is the interpretation they keep laying on top of reality until the whole road feels hostile. A delay becomes rejection. A setback becomes identity. An unknown becomes threat. A season of silence becomes proof that life has abandoned them. And by the time they are done interpreting, they are carrying far more pain than the moment itself ever required. That is why this whole episode has really been about posture. The posture of someone who does not take every delay personally, who acts before they feel ready, who trusts movement more than doubt, who understands that the path appears after the step, who builds confidence in motion, who stops reading every setback as a final answer, who expects life to meet them differently, who no longer fights every unknown, who does not need total control in order to keep going, and who finally learns to live as if life is still on their side, even when the shape of things is not fully visible yet. That posture changes everything, not in a dramatic, magical way, in a practical one. It changes how you move through uncertainty. It changes how quickly you collapse under friction. It changes how much unnecessary suffering you add to hard moments. It changes how long you stay available to possibility before fear convinces you to retreat. It changes the quality of your decisions because you are no longer choosing from panic, humiliation, or imagined defeat. And that is where real strength begins, not when life finally becomes easy, not when the future is fully explained, not when every risk disappears, but when you stop demanding that life prove itself before you are willing to walk through it with steadiness. So for the next 24 hours, practice one thing. The next time something slows down, closes, shifts, or stays unclear, do not ask, "Why is life against me?" Ask, "What changes if I stop reading this as defeat?" Then hold that posture for one full moment longer than your fear wants to. Because sometimes the biggest change is not in what is happening, it is in the way you decide to walk through what is happening.